Hi, welcome to another episode of About the Authors TV. I'm your host, Jake Brown. It's rare that we have a legend in any field as iconoclastic as FBI criminal profiling pioneer John Douglas, former unit chief of the Behavioral Science Unit at Quantico, the inspiration for Silence of the Lambs Jack Crawford, Netflix Mindhunter, TV sensational Criminal Minds lead profilers. He actually joins us today for a career and case spanning interview. John, we're so excited to have you on the show. Thank you again for taking out time to be with us. We appreciate in advance you covering any areas you have before in other interviews for the new generation of streaming fans that are just now discovering your catalog and groundbreaking profiling casework. We want to make sure that we get all the facts straight for them. It's such an amazing history. Let's dive right into it.
There are people always interested in my background and Mindhunter show to how profiling originated is what I do. Is it like the show Mindhunter?
For the viewer that may not know, please shed a bit of light on how criminal profiling actually works versus what we see in TV or the movies. For instance, you have to actually put yourself in the shoes of both the offender and the victim and think in both their headspaces at once, correct?
Over the years, what I've learned is that the people I train, the good ones, who turn out to be really good in criminal profiling, are able to put themselves in the shoes of both the offender and the victim, which is very, very difficult. It's very, very emotionally difficult. I had problems with that myself, psychologically, physically, and it's really difficult. At the end of the day, you can walk out of the shoes of the offender. And I can do that pretty good. But the victim, when I'm looking at a crime scene, and trying to construct what happened and what, in the case of a homicide, what that victim was looking at, what the face of the subject was like, and why did he do the things that he did to this victim. It's really the only way to do it. You cannot be like a detective you see on television that have what we call isolation of affect, where you see them at a crime scene and they're not going to be crying, but they're going to be a real stoic type personality. I'm not like that. I'm not going to be crying, but I'll have difficulty sleeping. I go to bed thinking about the case, trying to come up with ideas of not only who it is, but I'm trying to think of the pre-offense behavior of the offender, the post-offense behavior, and what would it be like to interview this person if we finally come up with a suspect? What would be the best approach? So it's hazardous to your health. And I have a lot of young people who write me letters and say, I've been wanting to be, I want to be just like you. When I grow up, I'm in eighth grade. Down to eighth grade. I mean, I didn't even know what I wanted to do in eighth grade. I didn't know anything eighth grade. And I have to warn them. I have to say, really, read Mindhunter, read the book Mindhunter and some of my books, and you will see the emotional toll that it takes. It takes on me and my colleagues. Plus, there's not that many positions in the United States where you could be a criminal profiler. The FBI has the Behavioral Analysis Unit. I've trained police officers around the country where they have certain profilers, certain people, men and women in their department. But there's not a whole lot. A lot of people doing this, unfortunately. You could kind of do it, though, if they went into something like in corrections and probation, parole, where you're doing assessments. I've done some of those. In fact, my last book called The Killer Across the Table, it's where I went in and I do an assessment on a subject to schedule to get out of prison. I did one where this guy was a child killer, killed a brownie, going door to door selling cookies. And this was a school teacher who would do the killing. And he spent the maximum 30 years in prison, and now he's getting out. So I had to go in. They represented me. The parole board swore me in. They introduced me to him. I spent like hours and hours with him, and I got him to the point where I not only was walking in the victim's shoes, his shoes, and I got him to a point during the interview where he was back. He was back perpetrating the crime. And he looks at me and says, John, and he's sweating. His pecs and his chest are trembling, and it's soaking wet, and it's freezing in this area where we're doing this, where I'm doing the interview of him. And he says, when I heard the knock on the door, John, I looked up and I saw her there. I knew I was going to kill her. I knew, and then he goes through the actions of all this. Now I'm doing an interview with him to assess whether or not he should be released from prison. I totally I've got him away from thinking about that and back at that scene, back perpetrating that crime. And then, so the next day I go before the parole board, and they're trying to assess whether or not this guy should get out. He's been in prison at that point about 20 years, and they're shocked at what I came up with. And I said, you shouldn't be shocked. I said, what you all are relying on is self-reporting. You go in and interview this guy, and his name is Joseph McGowan, and you ask, how do you feel, Joe, about the urges you have to kill and to kill children? You think you're over that now? Yeah, Doc, I'm fine. I feel much better about myself now. I don't think about it all. When I was doing the interview with him, he just broke down. He went through all the specific details of the crime. How are you able to do that? He says, because I study the crime. I study what he did to the victim. I do victimology. I look into his background, the method of the homicide, his pre-offense behavior, leading up to the crime, what caused him to go out that day and that day to kill someone. It was interesting too, Jake. They said, well, he's a pedophile. He's a pedophile. And no. I said, he's not a pedophile. He kills a 7-year-old girl. He's a killer. It could have been a 70-year-old woman knocking on that door that day, and he was going to kill. He was going to kill whoever was at that door. He's a school teacher. He was rejected by his colleagues. It was just before Easter time. They were going away on trips. He was not invited. He was rejected by his girlfriend, broke up his fiance with him, living in the basement with his mother and grandmother upstairs. He was prime. He was ready to go. And so to me, Jake, it just seems like basic stuff. And so for kids too, if you don't want to go into profiling, there's a need in probation and parole to make decisions. But if you're going to do this, you're going to have to look at the crime scenes, at least look at the autopsy protocol, read the autopsy reports. And it's pretty gut wrenching. I mean, it's not something at the end of the day you can just, I'll see you tomorrow. Man, you take it home with you, and it's tough.
Talk about taking these guys back to the scene of the crime. Take us back to when you and your colleagues first came up with this genius idea of going into maximum security prisons to interview serial killers about their crimes and why they committed them. And maybe we could use Big Ed Kemper as an example of this process in action.
Kemper was really one of the first ones. And just Jay, why I did this was because at Quantico, I was transferred back to the FBI Academy at 32 years of age, like Holden Ford, in the same age. But my background was probably a lot better than Holden Ford's. I had 4 years in the military. I had 7 years as an FBI agent on a SWAT team. Also a sniper on the SWAT team. I was trained, a hostage negotiator, a couple of advanced degrees. And then so now I'm back at Quantico. And the reason I wanted to interview people like Kemper was because I'm sitting in classes auditing instructors, and they're getting their facts wrong about the case according to the students. Someone will raise their hand and say, "Hey, Mr. So-and-so, you're crazy. Your facts are totally wrong. I worked the case." So I'm thinking, holy mackerel, I got to get out there. If I'm in California, I got to interview Kemper. So I did. So I go in there, but I know the case. I study the case before I go in. And this is what's different about the show, okay? I did not go in there with a 30-pound tape recorder. I don't have a 30-pound tape recorder. I've only used, and my partner and I then only used the tape recorder once, and it was a small cassette tape recorder. And after that interview with Kemper, no more, because inmates, and they should be, they're paranoid. Who's going to be listening to this tape? Where are you going with this tape? With this tape, is the warden going to hear this? What I'm saying here, and notes. No note taking. I don't take notes. I don't take notes at all, because I want eye contact. I want eye contact. I want to have a conversation. I don't want to have an interrogation. I don't. I'm not doing like an application for an interview. I'm not interviewing him. I want him to ask me questions as well. So I got all this information. We will develop a 57-page computerized interview protocol with Dr. Ann Burgess, who's the nurse, or she's a psychologist in the show, but really Dr. Burgess is a psychiatric nurse. And she's not going to tell me or my partner how to do interviews. She's going to help us put together this forum where we're going to ask thousands of questions, but I can't go in there and say, okay, now, what day did you perpetrate the first crime, and why? No, I'm going to fill out who we are, most of it before we go in, and the rest I'm going to memorize, memorize the types of questions that'll have to do with victim selection, pre-offense behavior, post-offense behavior, all these types of things, trying to figure out the whys, the motivation. So here comes Kemper. Kemper comes in. I'm 6'2". How you doing, Ed? How you doing? He's monstrous, smart. He's smart. Has 145 IQ. In fact, I tell people that was the equivalent of me and my partner's total IQ. The two of us, we make about 100. We were about 145. So he comes in. The biggest problem, and it's so different. There were times during my interview I had to say, Ed, shut the hell up. Will you listen to the question? I'm trying to ask you certain questions, but you know why? You know why, Jake? Because this was his greatest achievement in life. This was like turning on a tape recorder in that brain, and he's just going to go through everything, the chronology and all the specific details. But there are certain things I want to know. I got to know to help investigators, and could we have caught him sooner? Is there anything in his background that could have identified him sooner? But the guy, he, if anything, I project false empathy, but really what was disturbing about is he never should have been a serial killer. Had he had the background, a mother who loved him, was and provided nurture and comfort, a father who abandoned him at a very, very early age, and the abusiveness that he had to receive at the hands of his mother. It's not excuse, but I understand why he took that next step. And the next step was to kill college co-eds. And why college co-eds? Because his mother said, those college co-eds, they're too good for you. You'll never meet a college co-ed, and they'll never go out with somebody like you. So, well, he's going to show Mom. He's not going to go out with him. He's going to kill him. That's what he's going to do.
Take viewers inside the Charlie Manson interview, if you would. That was unique to the way you approached it, and really important to solidifying the program within the Bureau.
Manson was another one. It was that they were teaching at Quantico, and there were LAPD cops in the class sometimes, and they would say, "No, your facts are wrong, Mr. So and so." So we're in California. We used to do road schools in those days. That means you go out for 2 weeks at a time, just like in the show Mindhunter. You spend a week maybe in Boise, Idaho, and you got a week LAPD or regionally LAPD and LASO. Let's go interview Manson. The big thing about Manson was, and he did a great job in the show, the Mindhunter show, is he's a little guy. And now I'm 6'2". Now, what these guys are doing, and when they perpetrate their crimes too, it's all about power and control. I have to give them this sense of power control over me. Even Kemper, as big as he is, I have to kind of go back and lean back. With Manson, I knew damn well that he was going to probably want to stand over me. So we made sure we had a credenza in the interview environment, so that during the interview, what he could do is get up on top of the credenza. Why did I know that? Because when he was at the George Spahn Ranch, teaching his followers, he would sit up on top of a rock and preach to them or play his guitar to them. So he comes walking in, little guy, real charismatic, but he would like us. Unlike some of the interviews you may see on YouTube of him, well, he'll just manipulate reporters like up and down and journalists. We had the facts of the case. We knew the case, and what's weird to probably somebody watching, we'll be laughing with these people. We'll make light of certain things. We're trying to project this false empathy, but and the mission is to gain knowledge and information. And the only way, I can't be doing that is, oh, they should have executed you. Oh, you're disgusting. No. I have to walk in the shoes of these individuals. So Manson comes in, sure enough, sits up on top of the fence, and now we're like the followers watching him, and he's going to lecture us. But I soon found out with him, he was never busted for being a killer. He's not. People have heard him as a serial killer. He wasn't a serial killer. He may have killed. They never got him on a homicide. They got him on conspiracy, but he was a fantastic manipulator. And he wasn't an attractive guy, which just it just kind of would mesmerize you. Speaking with him, he would send like Tex Watson out to do some of the recruiting. He was a better looking guy and bringing them back. But what he would do was he knew these kids. He was a profiler, Manson. A lot of these killers are profilers. He knew that they were running away from their families, the God Almighty dollar during that period of time in the 60s, looking for something outside of money and fancy homes and cars. And here he gets just right. He gets out of prison. He's at San Quentin, and he's in Ashbury, and he's at San Francisco, and he sees all these make love, not war. It's perfect for him. Plays a little guitar here, so he knew he would have sex when he'd have sex with these victims. He would have them not victims, the family members. He would have them fantasize, and he would script them. We call scripting, to talk that they're having sex with their father, and so he could maintain his dominance. And he would drug them up somewhat, but he would not take any drugs himself, or maybe marijuana. Why? Again, because he had to be in control. So he was an excellent interview, and from learning, because then you could see, later on, you could see cases like David Koresh and Ruby Ridge, that charismatic leader. You can see that, or Jim Jones in Guyana. How someone like that could have followers, and so he was really interesting.
So to be clear, you had to employ basically a photographic memory, then go in and reconstruct these interviews afterward.
Yeah, that was because I was involved in the making of that, and it's 57 pages long. So, and then I used the same thing when we would when I was doing with late Ken Baker, the Secret Service agent. We were doing assassination research. No, we'd fill out as much as the form as we can from the prison records, police records. Then we go in and then right after the interview, we go get ourselves a bottle of booze, and we go to a motel room, and no fancy. We're on the government workers, no fancy Hyatt Regency for us, and we start writing in, filling out the form, and what we observed, and so that we can apply this to other cases. And what's surprising, you would have thought Secret Service had something like I was developing. They didn't have anything like this at all. I actually helped Secret Service on a couple of cases when I was new back at Quantico, and then they end up sending their agents like one at a time, along with Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, understudying us. And they were some great people, and now they utilize this.
You really had to become a master conversationalist to get these serial killers to open up in the kind of depth they did and never had before. It really gives advice to aspiring authors that are watching about interviewing skills. Can you give us any insight into what made you so effective in that role?
What really helped me was being a hostage negotiator, because when you're negotiating, for the release of hostages and surrender, leave the bank here, one of the things you're stalling for time. Or now you're in prison, you're not stalling for time. But what you do is you paraphrase what the person is telling you, and then, or another statement would be like restatement of content, paraphrasing statement of content, what this person is saying. Why? Because it projects to them that you're on the same board. You're on board. You know what I'm saying. You're regurgitating back information I gave to you. And the other thing is that they will pull the wool over your eyes. They test you to see whether or not you really know the facts of the case. Again, if you go in there and without studying the case, all the information, police reports, the psychiatric reports, everything, they're going to test you. And very soon they'll be dumping all over you. They'll lie to you. They'll make fun of you. But when I go in, I reached a point in my career where I remember going over to Baltimore and had five killers in a circle, but they weren't the kind of killer I was looking for. Some were cop killers, some killed their wives, and I said, "Do you have a serial killer? Is there a serial killer here in the prison?" "Oh yeah. We got one, Charles Davis out there. Can you get Charlie in here?" He said, "Next time I come here." "Yeah, we'll see." So we get him in. They bring him in. Now I got Charlie Davis around with these five. This is crazy. And so he's sitting there like this with his arms back. They all do this with the arms back. Show me, tell me, show me. And I said, look, Charlie. I said, I'm really at a disadvantage here. I really don't. Tell me the facts of the case a little bit, all right? I mean, what's going on here? So he starts telling me how he was an ambulance driver. His dad was a police officer, and if he would spot a girl, he would then follow them, get the license plates. He had buddies who worked for the police department, so we can get a license plate number, run through, have the name. If they stopped at a restaurant, he either goes in or tells the restaurant, generally call the restaurant and say, could you please tell, that Mary Sue left the lights on in the car outside, it's in the parking lot, just to get her to go outside. The victim would go outside. He then would abduct her. He then would kill her. And then he would dispose of her body in an area where later on he will be dispatched because he's an ambulance driver, for the city. And so I reached a point with him. And I reached a point and I said, describe the crime scenes. And one of the crime scenes you described to me was that the victim was covered when he found her. She was covered with a blanket over her head in her own car, and she had been sexually assaulted. I said, Charlie, there's something about this case that bothered you. And he's looking at me, and I said, you had difficulty killing that victim, didn't you? And he starts getting red, he starts getting flushed, and all the other killers are all around the table, around watching this stuff. And he said, I don't know what it is. He says, but you went through her belongings and you found something there that was disturbing. What was it? I'd say, I don't ask, did you find? I ask, after a while, you get so good at this, you tell them, and they said, well, I killed her because I had to kill her. She would have identified me. So after I killed her, because she was begging for me not to kill her, she said her husband was sick, dying of cancer. She may have been using this as for mercy. This guy won't kill her, but he had to kill her because she would identify him. And he said, and I said, what did you find in there? And he said, I pulled out a photograph, a picture of her husband, and her child in front of a Christmas tree. It was a Christmas photograph. And I said, you took that photograph, didn't you? And he gets red as a beet. And all the other killers around the table look, and I said, you know where she was buried, didn't you? Yeah. How do you know? Because you followed the press. I mean, yeah. He says, you returned that photograph to her. You gave it back to her. And he's, because no one's ever asked these kind of questions. He says, and he's in a trance. He says, I did. And what'd you do? He says, I buried it in the soil right at her grave, and returned it to her. And then all the other killers are saying, what do we tell you about this guy? What do we tell you about that? And it's just, so I'm asking questions. So how's that good? Some cases I may decide, let's stake out the cemetery, or let's put something out in the press that will pique the curiosity of the offender. Because I think this is the kind of case where the guy may have a little bit of guilt and may show up. And sure enough, I applied that in quite a few cases with police, and it worked.
Well, it certainly did. What about the art of catering to the ego of the serial killer? You showed so masterfully how that was done in The Son of Sam and the Mindhunter show. Take us back to the real scene, sitting there with David Berkowitz, and how it really worked.
He would see that. The one thing too, and your viewers and listeners have to understand, there are different types of serial killers. Everyone wants to put them like in one category. He was more of a mission-oriented assassination style of serial killer, kind of like Joseph Paul Franklin. He didn't come in contact, didn't touch the victims. Interesting, if they were parked in a lover's lane area in a vehicle, he would approach on the victim side, the woman's side, not the driver's side. He'd kill them both, but he would approach, on that side. When I interviewed him at Attica, that's the other thing. These prisons are not necessarily like what you see on television. Yeah, even Mindhunter itself. These are very intimidating environments when you go in there, and you're oftentimes you're walking among the inmates. You're there, and they're looking at you. They say, look at this guy. What do you think he's at? Looks like a fed. I think he's an AFed. Yeah, I think he's a defense attorney. That's what you hope. They're thinking that you're a defense attorney. They're to help you, boys. So you're walking among them. So we get to a cell, and now they bring in Berkowitz. And first shocking thing with him was his eyes, real blue eyes. He's looking like this, me or my partner, back and forth like that. I introduced myself and say, hey, I said, we're conducting research here. We're trying to help law enforcement throughout the country. We've done some, other interviews here. The warden knows we're here, that you're hopefully going to be cooperating with us. It could help you in time, David, something. And so he's looking to see whether or not I'm BSing him or not. Because when I'm talking, he's looking at my part and see what kind of nonverbal he's giving off here. And so he's kind of hemming and hawing. And then finally I said, you know something, David? I said, 100 years from now, nobody's going to know me, John Douglas, or my partner, Bob Ressler. 100 years from now, and I take out the New York Daily News. My dad was a printer and president of the typographical union in New York. He gave his Son of Sam terrorizes New York City. And he's looking at that. He says, 100 years, no one's going to know us, but everyone will remember you, David, the Son of Sam. As a matter of fact, David, right now in Wichita, Kansas, and I said, I just did a case for them. And it's known as the BTK Strangler, find, torture, and kill. And in his letters, he's taunting the police. He's sending letters to the press. He's referencing you. He's referencing in the letters. Call me something. You got the Son of Sam in New York. Call me something. Like BTK, find, torture, kill. Give me a name. And so as I'm saying all this, he just lights up. And because now I made this inadequate nobody, this nobody guy, a somebody. I named him somebody and gave him this feeling, of importance. So then he opens up. He starts opening up. We start talking about early childhood, what precipitated this. He was adopted, didn't know he was adopted. His true mother, Long Beach, Long Island, after serving a couple of years in the Army. Who knows what he did when he was serving time in the Army. And it just opens things up. But you see, I'm armed with a lot of information. If I'm a reporter, a journalist, an investigator, they're gonna test you. Once they test you, they're gonna manipulate you.
Well, that certainly spotlights the importance and power of research for any aspiring authors or journalists watching. Take viewers back to 1981 to the Wayne Williams murders in Atlanta. That was a really compelling case where your power of projection and the profile it created really helped solve the crime.
What you're hoping to do, and what you're seeing more and more of that today, a lot of where we're cutting them off at the pass. They're not going past the 2, 3, 4, 5. You're getting them, a lot sooner. So. But what made it really difficult, Jake, back, see, understand, I'm trying to develop something, and to law enforcement and FBI, this is witchcraft. This is when, because typically, if you've seen the old Dragnet movies, it would be Jack, just the facts, man, just the facts, just kind of want the facts. No, now I got the facts, but now you're here to give an opinion. You're here to tell an investigation. You're on the right track. So I'm reinforcing, or I may look at the case and say, you're all going in the wrong direction. You have to refocus the case here and go in this direction. A lot of pressure. Not everyone was for it. And even today, maybe there may not be a whole lot of, in certain departments around the country, they may not be for it. But what you're trying to do, if everyone is on board, we're trying to stop other cases from occurring. For the next book we're doing from like next year at this time, that there'll be a case like that where I'll actually use the victim's sister as bait to catch a serial killer in South Carolina. So it's really important. And the other thing too, Jake, you should know too. A lot of people think all we do are murder cases, just homicide or serial murder cases. We do rape cases. With rape cases, we kept the number of cases 5. There were just so many rape cases. So we only serial murder cases, or we would do a single murder case, or if we saw 2 together, if we believe that the style of rape here is one of these rapists that will progress or graduate into a homicide. Because we have we have 5 rape typologies, we call them. In fact, you could add 6th one now, which would be a gang rape. And how we categorize them is through the verbal assault, the sexual assault, and the physical assault of the victim. Verbal, sexual, physical. at the initial confrontation of the victim, verbal, sexual, physical, during the assault, and then what is said, how does he lead the victim after, after the crime. So we do those cases. I've done public corruption cases, uh, product tampering, a Tylenol case. We do all different types of cases, not just homicide. It's the criminal personality you should be dealing with, not so much the crime. It's the criminal personality and his or her experiences that will make her be the Unabomber or the Tylenol murderer based on personal experience.
Larry Gene Bell is super creepy. He kidnapped one sister, killed her, then tried to kidnap another. Along the way, he killed another 7-year-old girl. What a monster. What's it like to actually have to sit there across from pure evil for hours at a time and do so effectively?
No, I actually, and I don't like to do this. I interviewed him as part of the investigation. I was in, they brought him in. I went down there, did the analysis, for the crime. With profile turned out to be very good, and it fit him down to a T. But we part of the interview process is I will create a room and make the room now an interrogation room, but a room with props in it, so that when we bring the guy in or woman in, whatever the case may be, they're going to look around and go, oh, man, they've been thorough. This is, and my name is plastered all over the place. So I had that done in a trailer the police had in Lexington County, South Carolina. He didn't talk in there. He didn't talk. And then I'm just waiting. It's early in the morning. And so happened when they called me and told me, hey, we got this arrest now. And it fits everything down to a T that you wrote about. I'm waiting in the sheriff's office. All of a sudden, the DA, Donnie Myers, brings him in. And I'm in a white shirt and kind of white pants. I just got out of bed a couple hours earlier. And it looks so, in a way, in retrospect, it looked clinical. Kind of clinical, which they all in white, because this is my line with him. I get him to sit down. Now he's on the couch, he's below me. I sit at the edge of the desk, and I start telling about the research that we're doing here. And people I interviewed, Larry, I said sometimes to them it's like a dream. After the crime, they'll say it's like there was almost like two sides of them. Like there was this good side and the bad side, and the bad side perpetrates the crime, and the good side doesn't really believe it or thinks it was a dream. And all of a sudden he says to me, he doesn't give a direct confession. He says, though, and I will testify to this in court, is that the bad Larry Gene Bell could very well have done this, but not the good Larry Gene Bell. Good Larry Gene Bell never could have perpetrated this crime. So that was the closest he came, but we had so much evidence, on him.
Well, it's a brilliant tactic. You recently released a book on your involvement in the BTK case. Please tell us what was different about the psychology and approach you took with Dennis Rader from other cases you'd worked before that.
First, I got the case. Remember, I came to Quantico in 1977. 1979 begins his crimes, and we get it, but we don't really know what we're doing. What we're really doing, and so we're looking at the facts of the case. But then again, when I nearly die on the Green River murder case, so you probably want to talk about later, but 1983, 1984, here comes all this material again, and the cops come to Quantico with information on Dennis Rader, and we do a really pretty damn, and I wrote about it in that book, Inside the Mind of the BTK, a good analysis of him. It was me and some of my colleagues felt that he was some kind of like a pseudo law enforcement position, that he, in all probability, was studying criminology at the local university, which is at Wichita State, which he was. He was at Wichita State. If he was married, to be this kind of a dysfunctional kind of marriage, and then do stuff about returning to the scenes and all that kind of stuff. So, but anyway, I got to interview him in prison. And when you do some of these interviews, a lot of times you really know before you go in a lot, but what you don't know is why he stopped. I said, that's what I wanted to know. Why do these guys stop? Because usually what we'll say is, oh, he must be dead. He must have moved from the area. But his crimes were so unique. What he was doing with his victims, posing them after death, taking photographs of them, taking some of their clothing, which he would later wear the clothing, taking pictures of himself, making face masks and wearing these face masks. And I said, why did you stop? Why did you stop, Dennis? I don't understand. And then you resurfaced again. And what happened one day, he got home from work, just worked a couple of blocks from where his house was, and he was a compliance officer, wore a badge, which means, hey, buddy, your grass is too high, your fence is infringing on a neighbor, you got to move yard, you have to move it. And so I said, why did you stop? So he said, I came home one day and I set up a tripod camera in my bedroom, put one of my victims, women victims' clothing on. I had this plastic mask, and I have photographs of all this stuff. I have a mask, and I put lipstick on it and hair on this thing. And all of a sudden, my wife comes in and catches me, and catches me. What is this crap, And he says, I have a problem. She says, you damn right you got a problem. You got a problem. What the hell are you doing? Like that. And so he gets rid of the stuff. So he takes it off. She threatens him, if you ever do this again, I'm out of here. But she then calls, she's a veteran too. He calls the Veterans Administration and talked to someone, a psychologist, said, hey, look, I have this friend whose husband does this cross-dressing. And oh yeah, that's this transgender stuff, cross-dressing. So not telling that the friend is her husband. So he says that scared the hell out of him for a couple of years. And then he would then do it again a couple of years later. He get caught again by the wife, and now the wife is on the verge of leaving his butt. Just totally, leaving him. But she did. She stayed. And what was amazing, the house was teeny tiny. It was a 1,200 square foot house, and he had all of his diaries and trinkets that he took from his victims, and he wrote these. And like artwork, but torture chambers. He wrote all these torture chambers, what he would do to victims, but he had them stashed behind false drawers in this little 1,200 square foot house. And the only thing his wife, she said one time to him, she said, because they published one of his letters, and he said, "Gee, Dennis, this writing looks like kind of like you're writing like that." And he said, that's not my writing. But that was a question I wanted to know. I wanted to know why, why he stopped. Because you go in there and with one question, like what precipitated you, Dennis, the son of Sam, David, what precipitated you to go out on this date to go out and kill? And it was learning about his mother and the rejection, giving up for adoption, never even knowing that till later in life that he was adopted.
For viewers who haven't heard of him, Richard Speck is one of the lesser known but still really most vicious serial killers that you interviewed. One twisted puppy. What was it like sitting there talking to that wacko?
Richard Speck, for those who watch Mindhunter, what really happened to me, it's so much better in real life. When I interviewed Speck, he was wild in the show of Mindhunter with the bird, when he throws the bird into the fan. He did that. He did this before we got there. He did that, and the reason for that is because when I went in to do the interview, it's like 4-tier prison, and the noise, there's always noise in the prison, it's chanting and there was broken glass and birds are flying around in there. Well, one day he got a bird, and Richard Speck did, who killed 7 nurses in Chicago, for your viewers, and he tied a string to his leg, and he has like a little pet. And so if you as a psychologist, or maybe if you were watching, you may say, well, look, he's rehabilitated. Look, he has this kind side of him, nice kind side of him. Well, not really. David, you can't have the Richard, you can't have the bird. You can't have the bird. It's against the rules, even though they're flying through broken glass here. I can't have the bird. Oh, really? I can't. What? So he gets the bird like that, and he throws it into an open fan and just kills the thing like that. So here I am now. I'm going into the Marion prison, and intimidating environment. Really, most of them are. Some of them are worse than others. And I'm going to be with this counselor who's been talking to him for years and years here. So I go into prison, go to one gate after another, and finally I get to the counselor and said, John, I want to show you. I want to show you Richard Speck's pornography in his cell. He's got it all over the walls and everything. He's got. Let me. I want to show you this stuff. But meanwhile, Speck is off in a cage watching and sees me and sees his counselor, and he starts going crazy with throwing the F-bomb at me and FBI and screaming hell, like he's going to kill me. And so I'm walking side by side with the counselor. I say, hey, let's just kind of walk past this fella because I got to get back in that cage with him. I got to talk to him later. So let's go. Let's just kind of walk by. He said, okay, John, let me just show you this one thing, though, the counselor. There's been studies on, and some of the viewers may have missed this in Mindhunter, but it was in there. The studies were done in the 70s with pink paint. If you lock up a violent offender in a pink room, and they've done this with weightlifters, you'll see lifting 100 pounds, but now putting them in a pink, rosy colored room, they get weak. They can't lift the weight. This was studies done. So they did this with studies in prison, but they found out it didn't work in prison. And so and the counsel wanted to show me. So he said, look, let's go down there. We got a guy in isolation. You can peek in there. And you see the paint, you see the pink paint, John? I said, yeah, but most of it's off the wall. He said, that's right. He said, once they're in there for a period of time, it doesn't do anything. They're actually eating. They're eating the paint. This guy inside is eating, peeling the paint and eating the paint. So now, so it was kind of humorous. So now we got to walk back to Speck, who's absolutely crazy, screaming, yelling at us, much more intimidating than in the Mindhunter show. There's a credenza in there. He's on the credenza. I decide I'm totally going to ignore him. And so I turn around sideways with him, and his counselor's here. We have a desk, and he's in the back of me, and I'm talking to the counselor as if he's not even there. He's not, and this is what I say, and it's pretty gross, and I'm not going to use the street language for this one. And I said, you know something? I said, I know, what is it, John? I says, I don't understand what Richard eats for breakfast here. How he was able, he raped 7 women. What the hell? What is he? And I didn't use, and I used street kinds of terms and so terms. And the counselor came back and said the same thing. Yeah, I always wondered what the hell. All of a sudden, Speck back here chimes in and he says he didn't, and he uses the F-bomb. Didn't, and I knew that. I didn't do all those women. And I turned around. I said, yeah, it was just the one on the couch, right? Yeah. I says, man, he said, you're sick. You ought to be in here with the rest of us. Me, I'm sick. so then I turn around and he just opens up. It just opened up. But you gotta talk like that. You have to. You can't go in there, because I've had some people in my unit who went out and did interviews, and they get angry. They get angry as hell. Someone ought to put you on a rocket and shoot you up into space and leave you there. You can't do that when you're trying to get information, gain information.
When you finally decided to put it all down on paper in Mindhunter inside the FBI's elite serial crime unit, please tell viewers what that process was like.
Yeah, that book came out in 1995. That book is still, if you go on Amazon now, it's like 2000. Maybe we get royalties from it. Whoever knew? I never knew. I wanted to be a good instructor. I thought now as this young guy and teaching class, now I got the officers. You interviewed this guy or that guy. But little did I know that this would create cases. Cops started bringing cases into Quantico. Year one, by about 1977, 79, we started getting 59 cases. That was it for the year. The next year, double. By the time I left, and retired in 95, we were doing 1,000 cases. 1,000 cases a year. You talk about burning. It was just so many cases. We're on call, all the time, and we have a little turnover with personnel, because it takes about 2 years to learn this, and 5 years when you're really good. But that's probably like any good profession. It takes about 5 years when you really get a good handle on what you're doing. But no way did I ever expect that someone say, hey, this would continue. Like even in 90, when Silence of the Lambs came out in the early 90s, and Scott Glenn portrayed me in that film, I said, too bad, John, you're not out, boy. This would be a great opportunity for you. And here we are, 2020. And, there's Criminal Minds, Hannibal, We got the Netflix series on Mindhunter, others.
Don't forget Criminal Minds. By the way, how surreal has it been to be portrayed in so many shows and movies over the years? And how accurate is it to how it actually worked when you were active in the field?
No, I'm not getting any money out of it. I'm not getting, well, why pay me money when they could just rip me off? And that's true. In fact, if you go to, they had it on, if you go to Criminal Minds' website, have my picture on it. My picture, maybe to infer that, I'm part of the show or something. And early on, they did take a lot of my cases from my books and just change a few things. But Criminal Minds, Mindhunter itself is much more realistic than Criminal Minds because in Criminal Minds, what they're doing is they're involved. They're almost taking the cases away from the local police or having jurisdiction over the local police. Whereas reality is we got to be invited in and we can work the case under domestic, we call it domestic police cooperation. In international case, international police cooperation. But we're not kicking down doors. I'm not pulling my gun. Once you get to the behavioral analysis unit with behavioral science unit, when I was there, like we're not doing that. Plus the other thing is if I'm out on a case, like some of the ones in Netflix show, I will coach the police. I'm not going to be doing unless I get thrown in on it. But the reason for that, Jake, is because if I'm going to be involved and to that extent and all these different cases that we're getting, I'm not going to be able to work anymore. I'm going to be testifying in courts all over the country, my colleagues. So we have to go in and coach police. We may go in, and I've done this before, where I go in on a case and I may say, you're not the right personality for this, or you're not the right gender, or you're too old, you're too young. It should be, and they get mad at you sometimes. They go, hey, I've worked this case 5 years. Yeah, but you're not really, the right one. And I suggest too, when we do the interview, this is how we should set the room up. It should be a nighttime interview versus a daytime interview. Why? Because he doesn't want to be on the 5 o'clock news, and he'll be more comfortable during periods of darkness and more open to talk to you. So things like that I've learned by going into these various prisons around the country.
This is all absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much again for sharing with viewers. Taking the Green River case as another example, which you touched on a second ago, would you talk a bit more about how personally taxing a toll a case like that took on you and your team?
And what happened was that, and I go through it in my book, Mindhunter. In fact, right in the beginning, I Must Be in Hell is the beginning of the chapter. It's just before I was really getting, it was 1983, in the beginning of 83, and I just don't have the help. The cases are piling up, and I can't sleep at nighttime. I'm thinking of these cases. The hours are unbelievable. The hours I'm putting in, and I'm up in New York City now. I just came back from England on the Yorkshire Ripper case. I was there teaching police, and then they had me consult on the Yorkshire Ripper case. I was up in Alaska working on Robert Hansen, the man who hunted down women like wild animals, and would fly them up in the wilderness, strip them down naked, and hunt them. He killed like 16 cases, and just cases no one even they know it locally, but nationally people just don't know them. I'm talking, Jake, to a couple of hundred cops in New York City. They brought me in from around the area, and I know my material, so my mouth is I can talk, but I'm thinking, I said, how am I going to go? Next trip is going to be to Seattle, Washington, King County, with this guy known as the Green River Murder Killer. They're calling this guy, and I break out in a sweat. And my heart is pounding, and I think, I'm 38 years old. I'm going to have a heart attack here. And so I'm saying, God, regroup, John, regroup. You have to, regroup. So I did. I regrouped. Probably no one even probably detected anything, but I knew something was going to happen. I come back to Virginia, Quantico. I take out, I don't even tell my wife, extra life insurance, extra income protection insurance in case I go down and I don't have enough sick leave. And then the day I leave to go to there, I have 2 agents they assigned to me to train. Now they're in my program. It's not a unit yet, it's a program. So I got to train them. And my wife's saying, you shouldn't do it. You shouldn't go out there. You don't look well. I said, I get this headache. I'm getting this headache. I go by, I have to say goodbye. I feel I have to go by her school to say goodbye one more time because I think something's going to happen to me. and you don't look well. My head is really splitting here. So we fly all the way out, me and the other two agents to Seattle. I go before the task force, not feeling great. Go back to the room. I tell the two agents, I said, look, this is what you do tomorrow when you go before the task force. It's Tuesday. I'll see you Friday. I think I'm getting the flu, and we'll head back to DC. Well, good night. I put the not disturb sign on the hotel room door. And that night I collapsed as I'm getting undressed. Head hits the floor. I'm on the floor until Friday. I'm on all those days until they kick in the door because I'm not responding, and they get the manager and they kick it down. And I'm on the floor in a frog-like position, and I'm just kind of seizing. Periodically, I'm just seizing. And they bring in the EMTs. My body temperature is between 104, 107 degrees, and they then take me away to a Swedish hospital in a coma. And I'm in a coma. I'll remain in a coma for a week, and I'll come out of it paralyzed, and having to go 5 months of rehab, going to a psychologist. I think you were saying like your brother. I was treated for post-traumatic stress disorder. I was being treated something you think is just in the military, but depending on your job, we all can experience something like that. So I go through all of that. I am an emotional wreck. Like I said, I'm angry at the organization because I was looking for help. They weren't giving me help, and they give me help, but it takes years to train them. So I go back 5 months later, and then here's all these cases waiting for me, and a couple of more. They'll give me a total of 6 agents now in this program, and I came really close to dying, and I had complications. In a coma, I ended up getting blood clots. I had a recurring problem with blood clots since then, but I mean, I work out today, I exercise and everything. You would know it, but I still have some residual numbness in my hands, and the face was like all the left side, and it was they said my immune system was just got so low that something was going to happen. I was going to have a heart attack or die at a very young age. Maybe a good leader though, because I was with my own people. If I saw them being stressed out, I would say, hey, go home. I'll take care of your work. Don't worry about it.
Reflecting back more deeply on the sacrifices you made personally to advance cases professionally, was it worth it given the difference you and your colleagues made in the process?
One thing indirectly, what it did, there was this divisiveness between the FBI and local police, and this was like in the heels of J. Edgar Hoover days, and no bureau like oftentimes taking cases, trying to get the statistics. So we like a stolen car, they recover it, we claim it, and so Hoover can get more money for the budget. So when I was in the unit, what began to happen was that the local police and the bureau came together. They want to use this technique you guys have up at Quantico, this criminal investigative analysis technique. However, there were still people in my own organization that I believe I was getting too much attention, and not that I was looking for attention. I wanted attention to the unit so that we can get more people. And then as I was getting more people, the only way I can get more people is that they're giving me people from other units and creating my unit. But they were give you an example, Jake, a kidnapping case in Miami. The agent in charge of in Miami calls me up and says, "Hey, John, we got a kidnapping case. I got to go before the press here in a few minutes. What should I say? How should I be presenting this?" So I give him ideas of what to do. Next thing you know, I get a call from headquarters from the Criminal Investigative Division. Who in the hell are you talking to the agent in charge of the Miami office? They should be coming through to us. They should be talking to us here at headquarters. Well, they don't want, for some reason, they don't want to talk to you. And the reason they didn't want to talk to him, Jake, because this is what the agent in charge was telling me, is all they're going to tell me is what to do administratively with the case. Cross my T's, dot my I's. You and your unit, you have experience. You do this stuff day in and day out. I was doing it. My 25 years, 18 years of it was this. You've seen everything. I want to deal with you and your unit, not them. So it would cause, even, so when I retired, a lot of people hated to see me go, but there's always a sprinkling, this guy, he's Mr. Hollywood. He's getting too much publicity, and I couldn't help the publicity. publicity. It was because of success that not just me, all my colleagues we were having. So we were helping police, we're helping victims of violent crime. We're giving them some type of hope, some type of even not really closure, but we got help get the guy and help the police, really coaching in to get the guy. So that's the big impact.
Well, it's credit you certainly deserve. What have you most enjoyed about your writing career post-retiring from the Bureau?
Yeah, it's a lot easier. I'm pretty much like the storyteller. And I got Old Shaker, my co-writer, Old Shaker. He came to the unit about a year or two before I retired, and he did a show for Nova Television, inside the mind of I think it's just inside the mind of a serial killer or something like that. Where he interviewed me and my colleagues, and that's how I got to know him. He had never really done this kind of book before, and I said, "What do you think?" I said, "Do you think there's a book here?" And at the time, he didn't even know. He didn't know what he had here. So they take me up to New York, and his agent would say, use baseball analogies. He says, "You know what you got here?" He says, "You got a guy who can hit 300 and he can steal 100 bases and this and that. He's got all these cases." So we went around to the publishing houses, and it was interesting. They would pull out books, not that I've done, books that people have written books about cases that I was involved with, and other cases. So little did I had no, when we did Mindhunters, and that's why you see, with this Netflix show, the writers have no input from me. They have not asked me, the writers, about the show or Fincher, the director. They're analyzing. But when I did Mindhunter, and I thought it was going to be a one book wonder. So I'm just skipping on the depth. I'm not going as deep into the case. I'm just presenting a bunch of different cases, but there's so much more. And little do we know, after Mindhunter was a New York Times bestseller, became #1, and then we got a 5 book deal through Scribner's, part of Simon and Schuster. Then went on and did some other books. I did some books without Mark. Mark did some without me. And then we're back together, and now we're with HarperCollins. So we came out. The Pillow Across the Table was the first one. This one we got now, Kill Shadow. And then we have another one. We're starting for next year. This will kind of a long-term deal with them. So it's good because what's really remarkable. I get so many letters from kids at my post office, who how it's impacted them, or they went into nursing, or they became a police officer or a detective, or because of how this influenced them. It helped them in a situation where they could have been a victim of a violent crime, but they read something in one of the books that helped them and helped them assess this person, or assess the situation that could have made them a victim of a violent crime.
Please discuss any involvement you had in the Ted Bundy case. There were so many talented law enforcement officials involved in catching him.
There was a Reverend Dobbs, who was with Bundy right up to the time of the execution. So we get a call. I do, and I'm now the unit chief. We get a call asking, like we should study him. Study his brain. We're not medical doctors, but study him. Psychological, and he should not be executed. And I said, we got all the information we need. We pretty well have him figured out. Go do your work. We got him figured out. They did actually study his brain, but his brain was normal. They found no tumors or anything like that. But we didn't. So definitely, he was an interesting guy.
Speaking of serial killers from Florida who were executed, you actually consulted on female serial killer Eileen Wuornos' film adaptation, correct?
Charlize Theron optioned the Netflix show Mindhunter. So I went to LA, Malibu Beach, to meet this gorgeous actress, Charlize Theron, who's really into crime. You know why she's so into crime, and Eileen Wuornos and stuff like I do, is that her dad was killed by her mother. Her dad was abusive. Her father was abusive toward the mother. She could only take it for so long. They're from South Africa. And she turned around, the mother did, and shot and killed her husband, her father.
Out of curiosity, who were a couple of the scariest serial killers you actually ever had to sit across from an interview and then walk out with the results you needed?
Frank was okay. Let's talk. Frank, I'll say Frank was because he's different. That he'll kill anybody. He'll kill if you're Jewish. He'll kill you. Or you're black. You pick up a hitchhiker, talking to a hitchhiker. Do you date black guys? And if she says yes, she's dead. But what? But the worst. I've said this before. The worst. And I made Scott Glenn, who portrayed me in or my part in Silence of the Lambs, listen to the tapes of Bittaker and Norris. You probably heard of these two guys. Bittaker and Norris. They were convicted of rape and serving time in San Quentin. And while in prison, their goal was, when they got out, was to rape and murder a teenager for every year of a teenager's life. So they got out, they rehabilitated them, and so I'm saying sarcastically, they let him out. They got out. They got a vehicle. They insulated the interior of a van. That was kind of like the vehicle of choice. And the reason they did that is once they got a victim in the car, no one would hear the screams or yells inside. Well, they killed a half a dozen. What made it nauseating and sickening was that they made audio tapes of the torturing, audio tapes as they were hitting her with hammers and pliers. In fact, Bittaker's nickname, and I interviewed him, and was Pliers Bittaker, because he used pliers. And while they're torturing, they're scripting them to say things as if they wanted to be tortured in these tapes, like it was pleasurable for them. And so these guys would then kill these victims, and then later on go back home and crack a beer and listen to the tapes and get a real thrill out of it and laugh and joke around, from the crimes they did. I made Scott Glenn because we were so busy when they made that movie, and I wasn't good. I wanted them to know what we all put up with, here doing these cases here. So I sat him down, and he got so emotional, and he started welling up with tears that I only could let him listen to it, and I don't like listening myself, just for a few seconds. And he said, "John," I said, I had no idea there were people like this. And he said, "I was against the death penalty." He said, "But listening to this, they should be executed." And he said, "Well," and I said, "No, they're not executed. They're out. They're out in California." And when I interviewed him, Jake, I had a female agent sitting on the side of me, and when she would ask him a question, he never would look at her. Never. He was very attractive, and never would look at her. She asked a question, he looks at me, and because he hates women. He enjoyed the killing of women, and the only time he got a little emotional was when we started bringing up the family life, the early childhood, and the mother, and the abuse, and all of that stuff, and even though there was emotional tears, I still didn't even, at times, I just, because I've had this with other inmates, and I really believe if you could go deep into their brain, you would find out they're really crying for themselves, that their life is ruined, that they have to spend life in prison, or perhaps get the death penalty, but nothing. They can't relate. Really, you can't relate to a victim, at all. They just can't. It's just too bad for them. Look what poor me had to go through my life. That was one of the worst ones.
I have to imagine the notoriety of these serial killers is in and of itself kind of horrifying, given the crimes they had to commit to get it. But before Mindhunter, there were so many that nobody had any idea existed.
We did the vampire that's up in Sacramento, California, the vampire who would drink the blood of his victims. Yeah, I mean, so we've done those kind of issues, and then some lesser known ones, just to get a feel, like you said in the very beginning, to kind of learn to walk in the shoes and to understand when you're looking at a crime scene, try to understand the interaction, what took place, and where police officers need them usually the most, have to develop more information, is in victimology. If you were a victim of a crime, I have to know why. I got an email yesterday. I want to know, what do you think of this? And this is like a text message. And a man's at a car wash. He owns a car wash, shot in the stomach. I guess he gets into his car, and then he locks himself in the car and he dies in the car. The cartridge is found at the scene, but the gun is found over a fence nearby. And I went back and said, look, I said, that's very limited information here, but it's usually those are we call personal cause homicides. There's a relationship exists between the subject and the victim, but the key thing is, which I have no information on this person. I don't know who he is, what relationship he has to you. I was telling him, I said, is victimology. Why? Why was what's going on in his life? Why would he be this victim of this, of the crime? And many times you have to go back. You have to go back. I tell police, you got to dig up more information. You just can't tell me about that this girl was a fine girl and good student. Are you sure? Who are you getting the information from? The parents. Well, maybe you got to do interviews somewhere else and really make sure that's really the truth. You got truthful information.
You talk to so many of these monsters about taking lives. Let's talk about saving lives. What are some of the cases that you're proudest of that your criminal profiling work helped solve in the field?
Certainly, the Atlanta case was, was a big one for me. There are other ones that even like the first year of Mindhunter, there were smaller cases. They didn't use the real victims' names. They used the subjects' names. But like there was one in Altoona, Pennsylvania. I helped the sheriff. I would call it a Lutz murder case where the victim's hair was removed, genital areas were attacked, and if this cop he attended, the sheriff attended Quantico and never thought he'd get a case like this. He goes back home and, oh my gosh. So I helped him in that case, the case in year 1, 2, it was in Georgia, Daresville, Georgia, of the majorette who's killed. Remember, they staged her outfit, so that actually didn't go like that. Well, how I staged the crime scene or coached them was to bring the rock. She was killed with a rock. The guy crushed her head with a rock, and I reconstructed the crime. So they introduced the rock into the crime scene, and that's what really got him to react, to when he saw that rock. So I mean, it's just different cases and testifying in cases.
Please tell viewers more about that aspect of your work.
When you testify, you don't testify that you did a profile and it matches, 80%, 90%, even 100%, doesn't matter. Someone else could have these characteristics and did not commit any of these crimes. But the ones where you find cases that whoever is responsible for these series of rapes, murders, arsons, it did them all. Why? Because here are the factors in the case. And that's where I started coming up with that crime classification manual, kind of like a Bible, using for law enforcement terminology, the word signature, modus operandi, a disorganized crime versus an organized crime, a mixed crime, all these different things.
To be clear, this was actually technically your first published book. It's now standard within law enforcement, the Crime Classification Manual, standard systems for investigating and classifying violent crimes.
Yeah, that was a base. Yeah, that was the basis of my doctorate degree, and it worked. That was when we sat together in Boston with Dr. Ann Burgess and Ressler, and we're coming up with terminology, the word serial murder, defining serial murder, defining mass murder, defining spree murder. How can we define this and do it? Yeah, all this was going on. I'm still going to school and weekends, whatever I can at nighttime, but it's been a great career, and I'm still plugging along. I haven't retired. Totally. I'm in control of my life, at least, I think.
In fact, to make sure we give credit where it's due, what are a few of the commonly used terms that have become popularized in law enforcement and pop culture courtesy of this manual?
Well, you hear people saying, use like, this is organized. When you say organized, we don't mean organized crime, that this crime has been premeditated, calculated. Little evidence is left by the offender. He brought the weapon, to the scene. Maybe he even staged the crime scene. We see that staging came another one. Is that, and usually when you see staging, it's because the offender, there is a relationship between the subject and the victim, and they're trying to throw a curve. A husband kills a wife, but he wants to make it look like a burglary. So to throw off the investigative stuff, he'll do things. And what's interesting, Jake, that even though they could read our books and read about staging, you can pick it up. Even though they've read these books, people will say, "Well, God, you're giving away secrets." No, you can pick the things up that they're not quite right. They think they're doing the right thing, but when you get a case like John Benet Ramsey case. And people hated me. Cops hated me in the country. The FBI went against the FBI. When I said that the family is not responsible here, and I gave the reasons why, that parents kill, but there's a look to it. There's a certain look, and these parents are not the kind of parents that would do this kind of crime, sexually assault the victim, their child with a paintbrush, crack her skull open like a coconut after she was on her last breath, or if not, her heart had stopped, so that all they have is a little bruising here. But when they remove the skin from the scalp, they see it's cut, cracked like a coconut, 8 inches. I mean, there's just parents and the cops and the bureau, they were wrong. They were wrong on that one, on that case, and it ruined the lives of. CBS did a show where they were sued, where they brought in these retired FBI agents and top forensic people in the country, and they blamed it like Burke. Like Burke had somehow, the son, who was like 9 years of age at the time, he had something to do with the guy. I mean, Burke is still alive. I mean, you're charging somebody for a murder. Yeah, they were sued. I don't know how much they got, but they were sued and they won the suit.
You actually consulted on the O.J. Simpson case during its civil phase, correct?
I assisted in that case for the Brown family, for Daniel Petrocelli, on the civil case. He came back here to Virginia. They were going to Cellmark with DNA, him and another attorney, and they talked with me and John, and I did a pro bono for them. And I was going to be out in LA to do, I think I had some book coming out. That's when they used to put you on the road on book tours, right? And so he mentions me in his book of how I'm looking at the case in his office, and he sees me shaking my head, and he says, "What's wrong, John?" And he said, "Well," he says, "I would never be asked to do a case like this." Why? Because there's so much evidence. There's so much evidence. You don't need somebody like me. There's so much evidence pointing. And he said, "Well, just forget about that. Just do it as if, like reconstruct." So I went through everything, like the killing of Ron Goldman, how that happened versus the killing of Nicole, and I said, again, a polygraph, because my dad was alive then, and he says, "Are you sure about this? I mean, he played for the Buffalo Bills, and I said, look, he's on television." I says, "Yeah, but you see, let's go to the crime scene. She's nearly decapitated. It's kind of looking like John Benet Ramsey. Overkill. The guy, it's not just a cutting of the throat. She was hit once to render her unconscious, maybe at the back end of the knife, and then went after Goldman, but come back to nearly cut the head off. This is not something like a drug murder or something like that. This is overkill, and type of thing. This is not killing. It's destroying. It's just destroying, her, and that's a personal cause, kind of homicide. So people can't understand how a guy committed crime can look into the camera, and be so innocent looking, and because again, it's justifiable in his way of thinking. Whatever he found out about her, her sex life, and that was it.
You spent a lot of time personally with Amanda Knox, and an inordinately large amount of time contributing to the profile that helped get her out of an Italian prison. What convinced you so early on that she was innocent?
Because once I got the material, all the case material from the agents, some agents who over there and initially worked with the family, we had to the mission. Excuse me. We had to come out with information, because the public, the American news was picking up information from tabloid newspapers. There were tabloid newspapers there, and the stuff that they were getting, these tabloids, the information was totally wrong. It was all erroneous, and the techniques that they used to get the so-called confession. I mean, people want to hear crimes like this. Well, how could anyone ever confess to a crime that they didn't do? Believe me, we've had so many cases like this. I live in Virginia. There's a cop in prison right now who's known as, bring in Harry on these big cases, because Harry, he gets these confessions because of the browbeating, and you break somebody down, to the point, and without a tape recorder on, without nothing, until you break them down, and you as a suspect, you just want to get this over with. And my attorneys will figure it out later on. You're thinking, when I get to trial, but then, so you sign this statement here, and then maybe they turn on the tape recorder to go through the case after they fed you information only the killer would have known. Your goose is cooked. And we have a case right now called the Norfolk Four. If you guys want to look it up, you'll see that one. The West Memphis 3 is another one. There's some other ones around the country, and Ramsey's would definitely, they would have been one. And I got close to that family. And Lou Smith, the detective, was a fantastic investigator there, and I truly believe that Patsy, she was in the fourth stage of ovarian cancer, and she was in remission, and that cancer came back. And I've seen that so many times in families where they will get, if they're not already sick, they will get sick and die. And that really it made me angry too when I saw that CBS show and how these people, what they were doing, reenacting the crime and bringing an 8-year-old kid in with a flashlight, hitting a dummy in the head, and then accusing Burke Ramsey. It's a disgrace. The people who were involved in that show.
Well, most of us who are old enough to remember the Jean Bonnet case remember the absolute train wreck that local law enforcement made of it before the feds came in and profilers like yourself got involved. What made you lean toward innocent versus guilty so early on, and why do you feel it's been important at times to go against the grain when you had that instinct?
The problem is when I was in the bureau, I would see it sometimes too, but I couldn't do it because I can't assist the defense. The defense would ask me to provide help, and we could, unfortunately for them, the government and the police, we have all the resources. We can bring all the experts, and they may not have it. So now, I could do it. I could come in or give advice, on cases of how they should, But you have to get the police wanting to. Like the West Memphis 3, they don't want to, say publicly or reinvestigate the case. They pled to the Alford plea that we're guilty, but there's no proof of that. Well, they just had to get out of prison. Those 3 kids, teenagers at the time, young, they had nothing to do with the method and manner of how those kids were killed. They spent 18 years in prison. I mean, and there's others. Like that. People should not be convicted too because of eyewitness testimony that they have, or some of these so-called confessions. In the case of West Memphis 3, Jesse Miskelly gave a confession, which later on he recanted, and he would not testify. Even though he had an IQ in the 70s, he would not testify against the other 2, Jason Baldwin and Damon Eccles. So that kind of bothers me when I see some cases like that. Interviews should be, if you have nothing to hide, interviews should be recorded. Interrogation, they should be recorded from the minute that suspect walks into that interrogation room till the moment he leaves, not when the time comes to confess to the crime after there's been total darkness or nothing has been recorded. And you should never rely on eyewitness testimony, jailhouse snitches, that kind of stuff. You better have something more than that when you go to court.
You've taught criminal profiling for decades to law enforcement officials locally and federally all over the world. What's given you the greatest joy about teaching that particular side of your career?
When I was doing Ken Baker, the Secret Service agent, we were doing assassination research. We fill out as much as the form as we can on the prison records, police records. Then we go in and then right after the interview, we go get ourselves a bottle of booze. And we go to a motel room, and no fancy, we're on the government workers, no fancy Hyatt Regency for us. And we start writing in, filling out the form and what we observed, and so that we can apply this to other cases. And what's surprising, you would have thought Secret Service had something like I was developing. They didn't have anything like this at all. I actually helped Secret Service on a couple of cases when I was new back at Quantico. And then they end up sending their agents like one at a time, along with Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, understudying us. And there were some great people, and now they utilize this. Is getting feedback, from those you taught that applied what applied the principles, applied what they've learned from your classes, and I get that. I get that feedback all the time, going back years ago. That's and even the other thing too in the development of this, I always gave credit to the police. We may have played a big role in an investigation, and they would maybe write a letter, but I'd always put the police first. They're the ones that they got to do the hard work and knocking on the doors and doing the gumshoe work, and I think that also helped us. That when they wrote letters to the director of the bureau saying, hey, these guys really helped us, and they never wanted to take credit for what they've done, and it really helped us. And then what happened is that the bureau cases started rolling in. And not only did we get the domestic cases, now the FBI cases. And again, if you can understand the criminal mind, you should be able to apply to other kinds of cases. The same kind of principles apply. I'm not saying every case. Some cases are like an outdoor case. Body is decomposed. You don't even know who they are, the circumstances of the case, or someone goes in, robs a 7-Eleven, as an example, shoots and kills one of the employees. Those cases are tough. Now, maybe if you have a series of cases that in the 7-Eleven grocery stores, we may come up with some kind of pattern or predictor, where they may strike next.
It must have felt great to hit that 40-year mark from when you first joined the Bureau, and to look back on what a huge difference you made in those cases both you were involved in, and then in terms of how the reverberation of all of your work has helped how profiling's done today. It must make you feel really good.
Amazing. In fact, I told my wife this morning, and she wasn't too impressed because she's teaching in her 49th year of teaching. 49 years of teaching, and she still gets up in the morning. Although got this crazy virtual stuff that's going on in schooling, but she's another go getter. That's for sure.
Well, it doesn't sound like you've lost much of your touch. It must make you feel really good when a law enforcement official comes up with a copy of Mindhunter for you to sign and tells you that book inspired them to want to get into this business.
Well, a great book is Law and Disorder. We had a different publisher, did hustle the book. Law and Disorder. It's cases where how I help people get out of prison. The West Memphis Three. I helped them in that team. Amanda Knox, John Benet Ramsey. I discuss that case. As well. And there's another one that escapes my mind right now. That was good. People like profiling. They would like anatomy of motive. It's a very, very good one to have. There's also, I did 2 academic books. A big one is and writers will use this book. They call it Crime Classification Manual, and they did that with Dr. Ann Burgess from Boston and the late Bob Ressler, my partner. And it's in its 3rd edition. But what's good, it's kind of like how you go to a doctor and he's profiling you, and because I have a doctor like this, and he's going through and putting information in, and then it goes along it goes along a line, and finally he has to make a decision. Do you have pneumonia or you just have a cold? And it's like the DSM-3, or now it's like 5 or so in psychology. This is the Crime Classification Manual, CCM. So it tells you, okay, this is a contract murder. This is typically the victim of a contract murder. This is typically how the investigation, what you would find, what kind of search warrants that you would use in a case like that. So that's kind of an interesting one too. This Killer Across the Table was good too. Again, those 4 cases I mentioned. And the current one, I know just briefly on the current one, this case is Joseph Paul Franklin, a racist serial killer, racist, anti-Semitic. It was in 1980, 82. And I'm just starting the profiling when the FBI, for the first time, will ask me to do a FBI case. Up to that point, I was just doing cases for the local police. So here, they're asking me, because I know the unit chief. We were together in Milwaukee on the same SWAT team. Good guy. John, you think you can do it? And I said, well, I'll see what I can do. What do you need? Pretty much everything. I said, this is going to be a little bit different because I'm usually dealing in unknown subject cases. Now we know who it is. It's Joseph Paul Franklin. He just escaped from a jail We don't know where he is in the United States. So what my goal now is to, and the mission is to go through his entire life and try to predict where he will travel to next in the United States, so we can put our resources there. He's also making threats on previously to President Jimmy Carter. So Secret Service is up in arms about that. So my role is to figure that out, where he's going to go and where the resources should go. And then we end up uh, catching him. And then I end up doing 6 years later, 7 years later, Secret Service, I end up doing assassination research. Well, I'll interview him. I'll interview James Earl Ray. I'll interview Squeaky Fromm, who shot Ford. Sarah Jane Moore shot Ford, President Ford. I'll interview Arthur Bremer, who shot the late, George Wallace. Start doing assassination research. And what's interesting is the backgrounds are just similar. It's just your life's experiences that will decide which way they're going to go, what type of crime. Not that everyone's going to go that way, but they seem to have this dysfunctional, inadequate background, abusive, oftentimes abuse is found in their backgrounds, and but it's still difficult to predict who will be inspired to go out and perpetrate a crime like Joseph Paul Franklin. I'll give you a good example. I was still in the bureau and I was asked to speak to a writers group in New York City, and it was for dinner. And usually my kind of stuff, when people start puking if they see that, because I usually have a little slideshow along with my presentation. And so I did. Everyone ate the dinner, so I did a little slideshow, but nothing bad. I mean, this was or distant shots. And they're going like this. Oh, gee. And I said, something? I said, it's
What
no
advice do
wonder
you have from a writing standpoint for
your books
professionals doing
sometimes
that
they
kind
don't
of
make
work?
sense. They don't make sense. The ending, the killer or whatever comes out of nowhere to perpetrate, because it doesn't make sense how you develop this. You have to read books like true crime, or read books like I have. And again, a crime classification manual, sexual homicide, patterns and motives. You read those those kind of books, and that's how you learn and use the right kind of terminology. But you can't be doing one of these. And I think I may have written about that in mine at the very end, like where I had that at that Writers Guild meeting, and they were like that. I thought, geez, and that's what I told them. I said, no wonder if you can't take this, how can you like Patricia Cornwell? Remember Patricia? She was a novelist down in Richmond, Virginia. She came to Quantico and to learn the parlance, to learn the characters. In fact, one of the characters she said was based on me, with Dr. Scarpetta. I was a boyfriend. But so they take classes in death investigation. Go to a lot of these classes offered by police are open to the public, and they can attend those so they know what they're talking about. As a writer, or people wanting to go into the work, it basically is just you can read the books, and the kind of degree I give them advice, the kind of the degree they should go today. It wasn't available when I was going to college, but different forms of this forensic psychology today, which is a good one. They could take clinical, but more of a forensic psychology courses.
What about the downsides of the job and the fact that you had to take so much of it home personally and you had to live with it 24 hours a day in your mind?
I'd be fooled if I tell you, particularly when I was younger. Like I came back, like I said, 32 years of old, 8 years of age, and you get home to your wife and you're in bed, and your wife may get amorous or something, but you're just thinking, you're seeing something horrific that you've been working on that day, or your children. You're always overprotective of your children, and in situations where I mean, I just can't go out like a normal person. I'm like go to a park for a walk. I'm looking when I see people, boy, that girl, she's got headsets on. She's now going to be going in an area where no one would be able to see her if someone would abduct her there. You really got to think I'm crazy on this one here. I take my children in town when they're little, like 7 and about 7 years of age and 9 years of age, somewhere in that area, and pony rides. So I'm watching the pony rides, and I'm looking at the people watching the pony rides, and I see this one guy taking pictures, and I said, Lauren, Erica, do you see this guy over here? I said, yeah. I said, you watch. He doesn't have children on those pony rides over there. You watch him. He's just acting. He's just, and his affect, and the way he's looking, and then so that it ends the pony ride. Sure enough, the kids get off. Unbeknownst to them, these little girls, this guy is now following them. They're following them, taking pictures of him. And so I'm telling, okay, we're going to case this girl. We're going to follow this guy now. I said, oh look, so there are people like this in this world. Now, what if I'm in a situation where, and we're home, you're selling Girl Scout cookies and or something for the church, and I send you out in the neighborhood we think is a nice neighborhood, but we never really know who's really what's going on in this neighborhood. And you knock on this guy's door. Now, I'm not saying do anything, but he looks out and sees if any adults are with you. And next thing you know, you may be brought into that situation. So I'm always looking. Or if I go to a mall, I see shows dancing on stage, and this other one, and I'm looking around at the people watching these kids doing ballets. And all of a sudden, my wife, we lock eyes. I said, I know you see the same person I see over there. So my wife, I changed my wife, made her crazy as hell, But you're looking, you're just looking all the time. It's just, and you should be aware of your environment. You got to be careful of the computer, too. What's on the internet, today.
There's a certain power of prediction at work there too. Tell us how that really works in real life versus how it's portrayed on the show Mindhunter.
No, I would, but years ago there was a show, NBC did a show called Profile. It was a woman profiler, and it was on a couple of years, kind of crazy. And they took my book, and I was not involved with it, didn't have to pay me or anything. Took my book, and her interpretation was like there was a psychic thing, so she'd close her eyes, have these flashbacks of these crimes, in her brain. It's nothing like that, but no, you have to, or I'll come up at nighttime. I'm sleeping. I may wake up. I would have a legal pad of paper near the bed, just thinking. I go to sleep thinking of the case. I may wake up thinking of something about the case or something. Maybe we could try something proactively. That's what I really loved about the job. It's because profiling sometimes is you may miss a characteristic. You're trying to develop lead value, and I would try to teach my people is if you're providing a profile, if you miss, say, the educational level, we may not get the lead. I said, but this for the public, but this kind of information, I'm 100% sure of. And what is that? It's the pre-offense behavior. If we can define what this person was like leading up to the crime, what happened maybe during the crime, but then post-offense behavior. Is the person following the press? Did he inject himself into the police investigation? Did he reach out and provide information to police as a witness? So, and I said that I'm 100%, sure of. So it was those kind of things too that I was beginning to, develop. But yeah, taking on the offender, and that's why during the interview process, more times than not, they don't want you to leave, because I would tell them things about themselves without just making these assumptions, because just by the information I'm obtaining from them, I know this is probably where this guy is coming from here. This is probably what happened leading up. So it got really kind of neat. Rather than say asking questions, I would preface it by saying, "This is what happened. This is what happened, Josh. The day that you decided to go out. This was going on in your life at that time, and then you did this crime, and then this was after you did it. There's something at the scene that says, well, you're not. This may be your first crime, or you're a little rough, here. You did others later on, but this was probably your first, and this is your pre-offense behavior. People would have known certain your characteristics that you maybe would have exhibited after the crime, and sure enough, more times than not, you're right. And so that's the kind of information I like to put out to the public. Not so much white male, this or that. You may miss, and you're trying to get a lead on. You may tell police this, but when it comes to releasing public, I want stuff that I'm pretty certain.
Anything else that's different on the show versus how it actually worked when you were going in and out of these maximum security prisons every week talking to so many different killers?
One of the things they show in the movie, uh, the Netflix series, is that when they go in to check in, they make a major mistake. If you go back and watch the Mindhunter series, and I told them it was too late because I didn't have any input here, is they give their credentials to the guard. They give their gun. Usually we just would leave our weapon out in the car, but they get coming with their gun, and then they give their FBI credit. You never, and as a matter of fact, when Holt McCallany came to visit me here in Virginia, I said, "Hey, look at this. See this picture here? It's Ed Kemper looking at my credentials because and they want to see him. They don't know who you are. Manson wants to see these credentials. They think it's a big deal. And so in the show, they're turning him in, and it's wrong, technically wrong. It's a mistake.
Out of curiosity, did you come up with the term Mindhunter from the original book?
Years and years ago, Psychology Today one time did a story on the unit, and they called it Mind Hunters. But the pictures, about seven or eight of us. They had a picture of it. They hang on, you got a second? Let me see.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
I have as much time as you'd like.
Yeah. They did it. If you can see it here. Is it clear?
Yeah,
It's Mind Hunters. It's on Psychology Today.
yeah.
And I forgot the year, very early, but none of the ones in the picture, there's only really three of us that really were doing this. Yeah, and I was in the unit chief back then. I got the mustache, and yeah, so many of them have died now. But I was the lead guy. I was the person as a program manager, a program manager of one had me, and they eventually got me out of teaching, just special presentations, and just stayed with the criminal profiling. Wrestler, my partner, did teaching, and another guy, Roy Hazelwood, he's since died. He did a lot in the area of crimes against women, rape, interpersonal violence, like that. But that's how that came up. So we use that term. So it was, and then it got to be known that you're the Mind Hunter. Or they were calling me the young in the Atlanta case. They did stories. I mean, the young Sherlock Holmes. And then I tell the old shaker, my partner, sometimes he thinks he's Sherlock Holmes, and I said I have to keep reminding him, you're Watson. You're not the Sherlock Holmes here. He said, I'm not going to impersonate being the writer, but when you say we, when we testified, or when we did it, I said, like he did that with on the Ramsey case. Mark, I said, I don't remember you sitting next to me when I was grilled by 4 prosecuting attorneys and then the grand jury. I don't remember you being there.
What's that pressure really like when you're having your profile challenged on the stand by a defense attorney, especially after you work so hard to catch the guy and get him into court?
Let's put you now in front of 50 people, 100 people in a task force. Let's see the pressure coming in from your own organization, the people in the audience that may be looking at, what is this crap? Then let's see how you are. And then my training, I could see when I was training people at Quantico, are those who speak up first, or those who just kind of lay back, and then they get on the bandwagon. They get on everybody. Oh yeah. But let's see you, because their fear of making a mistake, and you can't be fearful of making a mistake. And one way to get around that is that you have to learn to say, I don't know. If you don't know, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I can't help you on a profile. I may be able to help you with some investigative proactive technique, or help you if you come up with a suspect, but I can't. There's just too many different types of people who perpetrate this crime, so I don't know. And as long as you do that, you'll be right more times than not.
I have to imagine it makes you proud to be recognized properly as a pioneer in criminal profiling.
Some refer to as the architect, because it was being bandied around, and even by an old timer in my unit, in the unit I went into, Howard Teton, but they never had done never did the research, and so it was really, it was more like the architect creating this and the vocabulary. It wasn't helping law enforcement to know that Charles Manson was classified as a psychopath. by one doctor, another doctor, paranoid schizophrenic. I mean, same thing with Joseph Paul Franklin, the guy we're writing about now, paranoid schizophrenic, or he's a psychopath. Let's come up with our own terms, our own terminology. And so I was more creating that architect, but some still say that the father of, or whatever.
But to be clear, you don't dispute those acknowledgments. Most people would argue they're deserved.
But yes, thanks. I enjoyed it. And when we get the next book out, I'll be on again.
What do you have coming up next that you're excited to share with viewers? I understand there's a television show you're going to be starring in.
Yeah, I just heard Thursday last, it's been kicking around. We did a sizzle reel, a 5-minute sizzle reel, they call it, and everyone seemed to, seem to like it. And so it'll be some of the cases that I've done, maybe some cases that, I didn't do, but that would probably, if we start filming, it would probably be the COVID and all this stuff. And we have to do a pre-production. I think it'd be like about April when we'd film it. So probably be later next year when it would come out. If we start April, I don't know when. I know they want us, I'll tell you that much. They want us to do like 5 different shows.
Thank you. We'll look forward to that. Looking back, is there a case that actually haunts you, that you worked on that has never left your mind, that actually maybe stays with you permanently because it made such an impression, even if you solved it?
Well, the Tylenol murder case, it's one, and I wrote about that. I mentioned a couple of different books, Cases of Haunters. I think that was one of them, and we had a very, very good suspect named James Lewis, who was arrested on the extortion part, of it, but they were never able to get him on the actual deaths of the victims. And he served time for that, got out of prison, and then went to Boston. And he actually showed up at a speaking engagement I was giving at the a library. It was a special on CSI, and he happened to be in the audience, and the bureau at the time didn't even tell me he was. They were watching, watching him, and then he got busted. And when he got out of jail for Tylenol, he got busted. He's real smart, intelligent now. Weird, it's kind of strange looking, real serious. And he was accused of raping a woman in his complex where he was living, and went to jail. But when it came time to trial, the woman was afraid of him, afraid to testify. And then half a dozen years ago or so, they did a raid on his place, never came up with anything. So that's one that remained unsolved. And Green River murder until they got Ridgway through DNA. But when they got Ridgway, I happened to be out there when they brought Ridgway in, and I told them that I didn't know I said, whoever you bring in, do not polygraph. Do not polygraph. I don't believe this person. These are justifiable murders in the mind of this offender. And guess what? Ridgway passed the polygraph. He was polygraphed, I think three times. I think two innocent, one was inconclusive. Three times, and then they eliminated him. And then I suggested that they go out to the crime scene, stake out the crime scenes here, and that somehow it leaked out through the task force to the media, and they were screwing up that technique. And he would bring out. You mentioned this before. He would bring out his son to these crime scenes too, and return to the same spot. He even had picnics in the areas where the bodies were. That's to keep that fantasy going, to relive the fantasy. But he's not going to pass. He's not going to fail a polygraph because he was like doing a service. He was killing in his mind, these worthless women, and justifiable in his way of thinking. So that was one until they finally got him. So I was trying to interview him too, and the attorney of his won't do it. I got to go back and try it one more time because I love to interview him. And I think some of the cases too, he's embellishing on these. A lot of times as long as they know they're not going to get the death penalty, they start tacking on, admitting to more crimes. So I got to do that. I don't even wonder why I drink.
Mr. Douglas, thank you so much again for taking out time. One of our favorite conversations to date. I cannot thank you enough for being on About the Authors TV. It's been a real privilege.